When it comes to the strategy and the revenue management side of things, they are entirely different. Obviously, you're looking at maximizing rates on a monthly basis there versus here it's more daily. Between those two, even though they're geographically next to each other, very different pricing strategies, obviously. They offer different things.
Welcome to RevLabs by PriceLabs.
Welcome back to another episode of the RevLabs podcast, the revenue management podcast by PriceLabs. Today, it's one of those special episodes where we talk to somebody working at PriceLabs so that you get to see who we are, who's the team behind PriceLabs, who are the people helping you day in, day out to get more revenue. And today, I'm joined by Niki. Niki, hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. So as I said, the idea is to get to know you, get to know your, how you see revenue management during this quick episode. First off, let us know about you. Where are you from?
Absolutely. I am located close to Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm actually just north of the big city. I live in a pretty small town myself, which I tend to enjoy. Grew up in a very small town in Illinois, actually, and moved to Indiana when I was in my teenage years and been here ever since. So,
well, as you know, Illinois is very dear to our heart at PriceLabs because obviously we're headquartered in Chicago. So kudos to you. You were born in the same state as PriceLabs. That's really a good point. So how did you get started? Did you work in the hospitality before industry? Did you work in revenue management? What's your background?
My background is actually in multifamily, so more residential property management. I worked with apartments for a lot of years, close to 10 years actually. Started out leasing and loved it. It was supposed to be just a quick summer job before I was thinking about getting my real estate license. And so that was my quick summer job to get my feet wet. And 10 years later, I stuck around. So, yeah, I moved my way up into the property manager role where I did a little bit of revenue management through that. We still had a revenue manager, but I had a lot of input in that. So that was kind of where my love for that really sparked.
And when it comes to multifamily buildings and all kind of things, how different is revenue management for, say, short-term rental companies?
When it comes to the strategy and the revenue management side of things, they are entirely different. Obviously, you're looking at maximizing rates on a monthly basis there versus here it's more daily. So totally different strategy. But what I found really quickly in being with PriceLabs and working with our users is the rest of the property management and the day-to-day struggles and wins and all of that great stuff is very similar. So it helps me relate to a lot of our users.
That's pretty good. So you said you gave a lot of inputs into the revenue management. Did it mean that you were a data person? Were you more like an industry person, trends person? What do you think made you successful as somebody giving inputs into revenue management?
I think in my property manager role, even though I wasn't the revenue manager, I had a lot of insight because I was on site at the communities. So where your customers are coming in, your prospective residents, and you're working with the team that's directly working with the public, and you can get that feedback that you don't get from the data. So if somebody thinks it's priced too high, or they, are saying that, hey, all of your competitors are offering X, Y, and Z special, then, you kind of hear that through your customers versus the data,
And when it comes to, so you stayed at the company where you're at, and then you joined PriceLabs, or did you? Was there any kind of a company in between?
Yeah, so I was really fortunate to grow quite a bit with the same company for a lot of years. And then eventually I did spread my wings and I branched out to another company where I had some more opportunities. And actually, at that company that I left right before PriceLabs, I was managing multiple communities.
Oh.
Um, so kind of gives you a whole new insight on juggling that many units pricing wise and day-to-day property management wise.
And were those in different markets geographically?
Actually, they were within the same city, so you stick to what you know, right?
Oh, that's very interesting. Does it mean though that's, you know, in the same city, maybe different buildings, the pricing strategy can be vary, can be very different? And what makes them different then in this case?
Absolutely. So the first one was more in, I guess, the original part of the city. So like where everything already was established, right? So
Um,
you have that ability to charge more because you're so conveniently located. The
mm,
community that I moved to, they were actually, the two were side by side, which was great. One was exclusively a 55 and over community, which is so much fun. And then the other one was a non-age restricted. But in between those two, even though they're geographically next to each other, very different pricing strategies, obviously, they offer different things. But where those two communities were located was more of like the up and coming side of the city. So like things weren't already established out there. They were coming, they were planned, and they're there now. But when you're trying to sell something for the future of what is coming, you have to create that vision, you know? So it's a totally different ball game.
and and how do you use data in this case, in this kind of job? How do you use data? You do, you know, I'm guessing it's not complete dynamic pricing all the time, but what kind of data would you be using to get, you know, to understand what to do or to look back and see how you did?
Yeah. Looking at those historic reports are huge, just like we have here at PriceLabs, you know, looking at your KPIs to see how you've grown and looking at what position do you fall in the market. Even currently, you know, with our neighborhood data, seeing what percentile you fall in. Multifamily has the same thing in their programs, you know. Obviously, they group things a little bit differently, more so like our hotel users do. But to be able to see what percentile you're falling in and if that makes sense for the product that you're offering is something that carries over to both where I was and where I'm at now. And I think they're both huge pieces of information.
Let's talk now about your role at PriceLabs. So what do you do at PriceLabs and what made you join the company?
Yeah. Actually, revenue management was by far my favorite part of my day, but it was just a part of my day, you know. It wasn't something that I did all the time. And it was something that I was fascinated with. I love the way it works. I love, you know, the thought process, the planning, the strategy. I love all of it. So it made sense for me to make that my full-time job. But what I'm doing here is I'm meeting with our property managers or in some cases owners, you know, on a daily basis. Sometimes those are scheduled as just to check in and see how things are going. And sometimes it's an emergency. Hey, something happened. I need your help. Which really helps me combine my favorite parts of property management into a revenue management sort of role where, you know, I get to help people. And that's what's most important here.
That's great. That's great to hear as a customer, or that's very customer centric values. That's of course very PriceLabs. It's so great to hear. And when you look at, you know, from your own experience of working with clients here at PriceLabs, what do you think is maybe a recurring mistake that you see people do? And you start talking with people, they know the jobs, maybe sometimes there's this one mistake that you see time and again, and that you think people should be aware of?
I would say the biggest thing is not over customizing your prices. especially when you're using a tool like PriceLabs, because it does so many great things on its own. And oftentimes you will see people that, because the options are there, and we have a lot of great customizations, but sometimes they'll pull too many of those, and it can actually create a bit of a hindrance instead of helping them. So
that's very interesting when you a bit too much of a good thing, right?
exactly.
It's really interesting to hear, because that's also what we see sometimes with hosts. People who have just one property, for example, is to tend to do too much and not trusting the algorithm, which of course is different when you have lots of properties, because then you have to think through many things, how you group, how you do things. And speaking of best practice, is there, on the opposite side, is there anything you think is really good practice? Imagine you have a very large portfolio, for example, of listings. What's a good practice you think I should maintain to have good results?
I think it's so important to group your listings, especially if you're making a lot of changes, or changes that apply to a lot of your listings. I think it makes sense to save yourself the trouble, and not have to go through individually. Especially if, you've got them within the same city or the same market, or even if, you've got a handful of properties that are owned by the same company or individual, and they have specific things that they want to see happen in their customizations. Honestly, in property management, anything you can do to make your job a little easier, definitely do so.
Cool. Niki, so full name Niki Turner. If people want to contact you, customers or prospects, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Absolutely. My PriceLabs email is just niki.turner@pricelabs.co. That's probably the fastest. I'm also trying to be better about LinkedIn, so you can find me there as well. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much for your time today, for letting me ask you questions and hopefully letting people get to know you better. And I wish you then a great day.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Niki.
Mhm.